In the fifth month of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, it became known that Russian servicemen were leaving the Russian army in droves. It must have come to their attention that fighting in Ukraine is not the same as guarding the cash register in a store. But for the same money that the RF may not pay for military action, the killing of civilians, and looting on an especially large scale, there is a big, huge minus. Minus an arm or leg, or even principal life, for which their parents can get at most 11 million rubles, approximately $120, which was promised by the mere state, or an unsafe bucket on wheels, a Lada car, of course, of their own production. Thus, in March 2022, only a month after the start of the hostilities, so far only 300 servicemen, fighting on the side of the Russian Federation, laid down their arms and left Ukraine voluntarily, without waiting for their discharge. But for some reason, they did not take their remaining brothers and left them to their fate. And fate over the last 5 months says that the chance of a Russian serviceman dying in Ukraine is 85%, and 15% chance that a serviceman can return to the battlefield after the war is over to look for his lost limbs to leave them as a trophy, the only legitimate trophy in this war. We are talking about servicemen from Unit 63354 stationed in Binetsk. It is reported that the occupants have initiated the procedure for termination of the contract. According to the mothers of the servicemen who refused to fight against Ukraine, the soldiers had neither uniforms, food, conscience, and money to pay off the military commissariat. The same information was confirmed by a human rights activist. According to him, servicemen had problems with uniforms and supplies, and there were some defective weapons. But the commanders of this unit said that if it doesn't work, you have to fix it yourself. Some returned with frostbitten limbs, and several people were left disabled because they had to cut the blackened meat off, and they could have avoided going back. Perhaps they would have fertilized the land of Ukraine much better than rotting alive in Russia, where they will continue to be morally abused for the rest of their lives. In the end, some people were dismissed, and some, under pressure from relatives and local authorities, were reinstated and went back to Ukraine after the hospital, which shows the true percentage of adequate parents who care about their children and the percentage of inadequate people who didn't care enough to understand several disabilities. Most likely they collected disabilities as achievements, or someone made a bet in a military unit on the largest number of injuries, traumas, disabilities, to win a bottle of beer or 100 rubles. A similar case was also reported by the Free Buryats Foundation. 150 contract servicemen of the 5th Separate Guards Tank Brigade of the 46,108th Military Unit wrote reports about refusing to participate in the Ukrainian conflict because they saw how, well, Russia treats its own people with the phrase, "We do not abandon our own people," and they keep abandoning their own people during the whole war with Ukraine. Alexandra Garmazapova, head of the Free Buryats Foundation, said that about 500 more Buryats want to quit the Russian army, showing the Russians that Buryats can still think with their heads and not trust the whole propaganda and belief that Putin is good and is saving Russia from a phantom NATO attack on their houses that are already falling apart before their eyes and street toilets near their homes without the attack. War in Ukraine. On February 24th, Russia began a full-scale invasion of independent Ukraine to steal as many refrigerators, toilets, and washing machines as possible. According to eyewitnesses, the Buryats fighting in Ukraine are particularly brutal. While Russians mostly drink and loot in the occupied territories, Buryats torture, rape, and massacre civilians because they have been offended since childhood and are somehow trying to compensate for the slave syndrome that Russia has imposed on Buryats for a long time. As of June 15th, residents of Chechnya were being blackmailed with kidnapping their relatives, torture, and other methods of pressure if they refused to go to fight in Ukraine, which is strange. Why send already demotivated soldiers to fight you could have shot them immediately in Chechnya. But Russian military feels sorry for ammunition. More and more depots have been exploding lately. As of June 18th, it was known that Buryatia is burying every day, and the Russian Federation is sending natives of poor regions to war because in regions where the residents are still on the level of adequate income, they are forced to give up the last to save their children from almost 100% death during the war. As of mid-June, the data of 184 dead from Buryatia is confirmed. The rest are simply considered missing, as it is easier, no body, no case. On June 29, 2022, the Buryat wives demanded that their husbands return from Ukraine, and there is nothing left to return, they say, one foot there, the other foot there. On July 12, 2022, the media reported that Buryats in Russia are jumping out of buses to avoid going to war. But too bad they are not under buses. It would be much easier, and almost the same injuries as if they went to war, though maybe even easier. On July 13, 2022, it became known that Moscow has formed a special military unit to recruit mercenaries, i.e. the mobilization has reached Moscow. Now those who had planned to go to the IT sphere for the same QA tester will have to go to test wheelchairs, prosthetics, or even black bags, in which their bodies will then be brought back to their homeland. Thank you for watching this video. Please support the channel by subscribing and liking this video. I look forward to discussing with you in the comments.